Okay, so in today's video, we're taking a look at finding whole number percentages of different amounts. In our last video, we actually looked at finding percentages that were multiples of 5%. So if you want to check that video out first, I'll leave a link for it in the description and also a card in the top corner. So whenever we want to find a percentage of a specific amount, a really useful percentage we can find would be 10%. So to find 10% of any number, all I have to do is divide by number by 10. So our starting number here would be 300. So 10% of 300, all we'd have to do is divide it by 10. That'd give us 30. So I found my 10% by simply dividing by 10. We can also do that again to help us find what 1% is. Because if I divide my 10% by 10, that'll give me 1. So 1% would be equivalent to, well, I'd just take that 30 and divide that by 10 also, and that would give me 3. So this is a really useful method. We can find 10% of any number dividing by 10, and then we can divide it by 10 again to find what 1% is. So for our question here, we need 12%. So we're going to partition that into 10% and 2%. So 10% of 300, we already know, we figured it out to be 30. We now want to figure out what 2% is. Well, we've already figured out what 1% is. So to find 2%, all we have to do is multiply the 1 by 2. So because I've multiplied that side by 2, I'm going to do exactly the same to the right-hand side. So we'd have 3 multiplied by 2, which gives us 6. So if 1% is 3, 2% must be 6. So now what we need to do is put these back together. So I'm going to add my 10% and 2% to give me 12%. I then need to add my 30 and my 6, which gives me 36. So the answer to 12% of 300 would be 36. We're going to use the same method for this next question. We've got to find 34% of 700. Well, to begin with, we're just going to find 10%. All we need to do is divide that 700 by 10, which would give us 70. And then we're going to find 1% by dividing by 10 again. So we'd have 70 divided by 10, which would give us 7. So now we're going to partition that 34% into 30% and 4%. So now we need to find what these are. Well, first of all, we need to find 30%. Well, we know 10%, so to find 30%, all we need to do is multiply this by 3. So because we've done that on the left, we must also do that on the right. So we'd have 70 multiplied by 3. That would actually give us 210. We then need 4%. Well, we know what 1% is, so to find 4%, I'd now multiply this side by 4, which means I'm going to do exactly the same to the right-hand side. So I'd have 7 multiplied by 4, which would give me 28. So now to find our 34%, all we need to do is add these two together. So we've got 210, add 28, that would give us 238. So our answer here for 34% of 700 is just 238. So hopefully you found that method useful. We've got some more questions to try now. If you want to have a go at these first, feel free to pause the video here and have a go at these. And we'll go through the solutions in just a few moments. Okay, for this first question, we've got find the value of 21% of 120. So again, we're going to break this up into 10%. So to find 10%, all I'm going to do is take that 120 and divide by 10. Well, that'll give me 12. I'm then going to find my 1% by dividing by 10 again. So I've got to do 12 divided by 10. This time that should give me 1.2. Okay, so we're going to split that 21% up into 20% and 1%. So now to figure out 20%, we're going to take our 10% that we figured out earlier and we're simply going to multiply that by 2. And because I've multiplied the left-hand side by 2, I'm going to do exactly the same to the right-hand side. So we've now got 12 multiplied by 2, which would give us 24. We then need 1%. Well, we've already figured that out to be 1.2, so I'm just going to write that underneath. So then to figure out 21%, all I need to do is add these two numbers together. So adding them together, I'm going to put a decimal in here and a 0 here, and we can just use some column addition. So we'd have 0 add 2, which is 2, 4 add 1, which is 5, and then 2 on its own, so 2 there. So 21% of 120 would just be 25.2. Okay, for our next question, we've got 67% of 110. So again, just like before, we're going to find 10% first. So we need to take our 110, divide that by 10, that would give us 11. We're then going to find our 1% by dividing by 10 again. So we've got to do 11 divided by 10, that would give us 1.1. So we're now going to split our 67% up into 60% and then 7%. And then we need to find these two values. So to find 60%, I'm going to take my 10% and multiply it by 6. So because I've done that on the left-hand side, I also need to do it to the right. So we'd have 11 multiplied by 6. That would give us 66. We then need to figure out 7%. Well, we know what 1% is, so we're going to multiply that by 7, which means we're going to multiply our 1.1 by 7 as well. So 1.1 multiplied by 7 is just going to give us 7.7. So then to find this 67%, all we're going to do is add all these numbers together. So we're going to do 66 add 7.7. So again, we can put a decimal in here and add our 0. So we've got 0 add 7, which is 7. We've got 6 add 7, which is 13. So we've got 3. We're going to carry over a 1. And then we've got 6, add the 1 we carried over, would give us a 7. So the answer to 67% of 110 is 73.7. Okay, moving on, we've now got 55% of 360. So again, just like before, I'm going to find what 10% is first. So to find 10%, I'm just going to divide my 360 by 10, and that would give me 36. And then I'm going to find my 1% by dividing by 10 again, so that would give me 3.6. So then we're going to split that 55% up into 50% and 5%. So then to find this 50%, I've got to multiply my 10% by 5, which means I'm going to multiply my 36 by 5. Well, 36 multiplied by 5 would give me 180. To then find this 5%, we're going to multiply our 1% by 5, which means we're going to multiply our 3.6 by 5. Well, if we know that 36 multiplied by 5 is 180, then 3.6, which is 10 times smaller than that, when we multiply that by 5, the answer must be 10 times smaller. So 3.6 times 5 would just give us 18. So then just like before, to find this 55%, we're just going to add everything together. So 55% would be equal to, we'll do 0 add 8, which would give us 8, 8 add 1 would give us 9, and then 1 add nothing on its own would give us 1. So 55% of 360 would be equal to 198. So this method of finding 10% and then 1% is extremely useful and will work for any whole number percentage. But there can be quicker ways to solve this. So what we could have done is we could have found the 50% straight away, because we know 50% is just a half. So we could have halved our 360, and that would give us 180. And then we can actually get from 50% to 5% by simply dividing by 10. So that's where 180 would have become 18. So that's something just to be on the lookout for. Okay, and for our final question, we've got 42% of 520. So to begin with, we're going to find our 10% by simply taking our 520, dividing by 10, that would give us 52. We're then going to find 1% by dividing by 10 again, so 52 divided by 10 would give us 5.2. We're then going to split our 42% up into 40% and 2%. So to begin with, we're going to find what 40% is. Well, we know 10%, so we're just going to multiply that by 4, which means we're going to do the same to the 52. So 52 multiplied by 4 would give us 208. We then need to figure out what 2% is. So we're going to take our 1%, and multiply that by 2, which means we're going to do the same to the 5.2. So if we do 5.2 multiplied by 2, that's going to give us 10.4. So now to finish this question off, to find our 42%, we're simply going to add our numbers together. So adding them together, I'm going to put a decimal after my 208 and a 0 here. So then adding together, we've got 0 add 4, which is 4, 8 add 0, which is 8, 0 add 1, which is 1, and then 2 on its own, so 2 there. So 42% of 520 would be 218.4. So well done if you followed along with those questions, and that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please feel free to leave a like and consider subscribing. If there are any topics you'd like me to go through next, then please just let me know down in the comments, and I'll try to make some videos on those topics as soon as possible. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.